think I was at that meeting too. Good morning, everyone. It's Lorraine Kohler from the clerk's office. I'm just running a brief sound test.
Hi, Lorraine. Good morning.
Morning, Councilor Pearson. So, presenters laptop, planning committee, March 23rd, 2021. Presenters laptop, clerk's laptop, March 23rd, 2021. Planning committee, sound check. Okay, and we are in.
Good morning. I'm
Good
going to
morning,
call
everyone.
Good morning. I'm going to call the planning meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and archived on the city's website. It is March 23rd, 2021. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Members of the committee are reminded of the 5-minute time limit, which will be adhered to during this meeting. Members can submit another request to speak if they require more time to ask questions or make comments. Members of the public have 5 minutes to address the committee. Members of the committee, please use the talk hand sign if you need to speak between items and raise a hand to move or second an item. I'm now going to go through roll call. First Vice Chair, Councillor Councillor Johnson. I see you there.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. And second Vice Chair, Councillor Farr.
Morning.
Good morning. Councillor Collins.
Good morning.
Morning. Councillor Ferguson. See you there.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Pearson.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Morning. And Councillor Wilson.
Present. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are changes under delegation requests. Item 6.1, David Braden respecting planning issues affecting affordable housing, infrastructure renewal, and municipal taxes for the April 6th meeting. Item 6.2, delegations respecting the property standards bylaw. Item 10.1 for today's meeting, virtual delegation from Veronica Gonzalez, pre-recorded delegations from Dana Sparks with Acorn, Kathy Johnson, and Manuel Balandra, as well as a written delegation from Ali Naragadi from the Hamilton Community Legal Clinic. Under public meetings, 9.1, which is urban official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment for 804-816 King Street West. There's added written submissions from Lynn Barlow, Monica Lee, Linda Ellis, John Abrams, Daniel Pauls, Rami Elgohananemi, John Duffy, Lou Vasso, Stephen Waterfall and Evelyn Krishnick, Chris Maxwell, Frank Braganolo, Rob Bernacci, and Marlene Vandenbroek, as well as a virtual delegation from Ann Pollard, which is replacing the initial virtual delegation from Kim Fernie. And then under discussion items, under 10.1, the property standards bylaw review and municipality comparison, there's a motion to amend the property standards bylaw to include health and safety concerns in rental houses and apartments. And under 10.2, rural Hamilton official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 2069 Binbrook Road. There's an amendment and revised zoning and official plan bylaws. And there's finally an added notice of motion 12.1 regarding 105 Filman Road Heritage Register.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Pearson. I think you got your hand up there. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Not seeing any. All in favor? Councillor Farr, were you able to vote? Thumbs up from Councillor Farr. Thank you. On declarations of interest, members of the committee, declarations for today. I see Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just noticed as Madam Clerk was reading off the changes to the agenda. 10.1 is a motion regarding property standards and rental properties. As I am a landlord, I will declare a conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give you the heads up that at 1 o'clock, I have a board meeting with the Food and Farm Alliance, so I will be leaving the meeting if it's still going on. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, that reminds me as well that Jason Thorne has to leave the meeting at noon, and Brian Hollingworth will be acting GM past that. Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting from February 16th, 2021. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson.
Mhm.
All in favor? Councillor Ferguson.
No, I was just voting in favor.
Okay, thank you. We got everybody? Yep. Okay, thank you. That carries. On to 6.1, the delegation request from David Braden respecting the planning issues affecting affordable housing. Need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation for the April 6th meeting. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Favor? Or opposed? Thank you. That carries. 6.2, delegations respecting the property standards bylaw for today's meeting. Veronica Gonzalez, and then we have pre-recorded delegations from Dania Sparkles, Kathy Johnson, Manuel Balandra, and a written delegation from Ali Haragani from the Hamilton Legal Clinic. So I need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegations for today's meeting. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Farr. Thank you. That carries. On to our consent items. So just members of staff who are speaking at today's meeting are asked to state their name and title before speaking for the first time. So item 7.1 is the Act of Official Plan Amendment, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, and Plan of Subdivision Applications. Need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on 7.1? Nope, not seeing any. Okay. We're going to vote on all of these together or separately. Have them separate. Okay, so we'll vote on 7.1 first. Carries, thank you. 7.2 is the annual report permit fees. I need a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by myself. Is there any discussion on 7.2? Not seeing any from committee. Okay, all receiving this report then. Thank you, that carries. On to item 9, our public hearings and written delegations. The public has been advised of how to pre-register to be a delegate at public meetings on today's agenda. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before the Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, and draft plan of condominium applications before us today, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the council to the city of Hamilton to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. To 9.1 is the application for urban zoning Hamilton official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 804 to 816 King Street West in Hamilton in Ward 1. Does committee wish to see the staff report on this? Councillor Wilson, yes? Okay, so we have Shannon Mackay.
Good morning. I'm
Shannon?
just going to share my screen here.
Take your time. Coffee break for me.
Okay, just making sure everyone can see the presentation.
Yes.
Great. So good morning. My name is Shannon Mackay. I am the Senior Project Manager with the Planning Division. I'll be making the presentation on behalf of Mark Kaler, the planner on the file. I'm presenting the application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at 804 and 816 King Street West in Hamilton. The subject lands are located at the northeast corner of King Street West and Paradise Road North in the Westdale neighborhood. The property is currently occupied by two one-story commercial buildings and a surface parking lot. The neighborhood context includes detached dwellings to the north and northeast, a 3.5-story multiple dwelling to the east, and a grocery store to the southwest. A mixed-use corridor exists along King Street West, with buildings ranging in height from 1 to 4 stories. The surrounding area has examples of mid-rise developments ranging from 3 to 6 stories. The lands are located along the King Street West primary corridor element of the urban structure in the Urban Hamilton official plan, and that is a focal point of the Westdale neighborhood and serves as a link between downtown Hamilton and McMaster University Major Activity Center. The primary corridor also supports higher density development. The lands are designated mixed-use medium density in the Ainsleywood Westdale secondary plan, which permits mixed-use development with a maximum height of 3 stories and a residential density range of between 30 and 49 units per gross hectare. The zoning for the site is mixed-use medium density C5 zone in zoning bylaw 05200, and it has a special exception permitting a maximum building height of 11 meters. The applicant's proposal is for a 6-story, 19.5 meter mixed-use building with 319.5 square meters of commercial space at grade and 30 dwelling units. The proposed residential density is 176 units per gross hectare. A total of 20 vehicle parking spaces are proposed, with 11 located at grade behind the building and 9 located underground. 2 of the parking spaces are designated for the commercial unit, and 18 are dedicated for the dwelling units, representing a residential parking rate of 0.6 parking spaces per residential unit. The current concept also includes 10 short-term and 79 long-term bicycle parking spaces. The proposed commercial unit is located at the southwest corner, just here, of the site, with entrances facing King Street West. Residential amenity space is proposed on the ground floor, and there are individual balconies for each unit. To provide for a transition to the dwelling units to the north, the proposal includes a minimum 7.3 meter rear yard setback with step backs above the 4th and 5th level. The proposal includes a 3.3 meter side yard setback with an additional step back at the 4th story adjacent to the 3.5 story multiple dwelling to the east, just here. Staff are supportive of the revised proposal based on the setbacks and stepbacks that provide transition to adjacent residential uses and reduce shadow and overlook impacts. The proposed parking rate of 0.6 parking spaces per unit can be supported based on the proximity of the site to transit and the provision of long-term bicycle parking on site. The council-approved zoning for the site does not require parking for a retail unit with a gross floor area of less than 450 square meters. To provide for greater flexibility in attracting a commercial tenant, the proposed bylaw includes a requirement of 2 parking spaces for any permitted commercial use with a gross floor area of less than 450 square meters. The commercial parking can be utilized by the commercial operator and/or customers to supplement available street parking, including metered parking available on King Street West and Paradise Road North. Staff are satisfied that the proposed commercial parking requirement is appropriate based on the limited size of the commercial unit and the location of the site along a primary corridor with access to transit and short-term bicycle parking. 47 letters from residents were received following the circulation of the initial application, in addition to those added to the agenda here today. The applicant has revised the proposal to include underground parking, increasing the number of parking spaces from 13 to 20. To address current concerns from residents and feedback from the design review panel, the applicant has eliminated a 2-story portion of the building formerly proposed above the access driveway at the northwest corner of the site and relocated the residential amenity space from the rooftop to the ground floor, reducing the size of the mechanical penthouse level. Just flipping through some of the elevations here. The proposed building massing implements best practices established in the citywide corridor planning principles and design guidelines and zoning bylaw 05200. Consistent with the corridor guidelines, the proposed building height is less than 80% of the approved King Street West right-of-way adjacent to the site, establishing an appropriate mid-rise built form. Staff note that the proposed 19.5 meter building height is less than the 22 meter building height typically applied to a 6-story building in zoning bylaw 05200. To provide transition to the detached dwellings to the north, the massing generally achieves a 45-degree angular build-to-plane measured from a 7.5 meter rear yard setback, starting just back here, and beginning at a height of 11 meters. There are minor projections into this angular plane at the 4th and 5th levels. Staff are satisfied that the proposed minimum 3.3 meter setback to the adjacent multiple dwelling property provides for an appropriate building separation while maintaining a consistent street wall. The development also complies with the sun shadow criteria established in the corridor guidelines, providing a minimum of 5 hours of sun access throughout the day on adjacent private amenity areas as measured on March 21st. The proposed design includes brick material on the first floor levels to complement the neighborhood character. I'm just going to take you through some site photos now. So this is the subject property as seen from King Street West looking northwest. Subject property again looking from Paradise Road north. The existing development to the southeast as seen from King Street West. The existing grocery store located to the southwest of the subject lands. Existing development to the east from King Street West. And west from King Street West. And then the existing residential area to the north as seen from Paradise Road north. And again, the adjacent residential uses located to the north from the subject lands. Staff are recommending approval of the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment and are satisfied that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan. The proposed development complies with the function, permitted uses, and design policies of the mixed-use medium-density designation and is located along a primary corridor intended for higher density development. The scale of the development is appropriate based on the application of best practices that establish an appropriate mid-rise built form and address transition, shadow, and overlook impacts on the adjacent residential uses. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Shannon. Are there questions for Shannon Mackay from committee? Councillor Wilson?
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Danko. First off, I would like to thank Shannon and Mark, the 2 city planners who have had oversight of this file. I know it's, as Ms. Mackay has indicated, it's gone through various iterations, and during that time, Mark was very accommodating, meeting with residents and groups of residents to go through the file. So I just wanted to, first of all, express my appreciation for the job that they've done. Mr. Chair, I do have some questions that will likely be sparked by the delegates. Just looking for some direction. If you'd like me to sort of use that time, if I could return to staff after for that purpose, or would you prefer that I do it preemptively now?
Sorry. We will have discussion on the report following the delegates, so you
Thank you.
can ask questions of staff then.
Thank you. I just wanted to let the people who are watching know that. So again, thank you, and I'll hold my questions. I actually do have just one question right now to Ms. Mackay. Shannon, the primary corridor of King Street West, can you explain to me where that extends to, please, through you, Chair?
Through the chair, it extends just past this site. It doesn't extend right into the oval in Westdale, but it does end just in advance of that. This is almost at the terminus of King Street West primary corridor.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold my questions for to respond to some, hopefully to bring some answers to some of the issues raised by both written delegations and those who are with us today. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. Any further questions from committee for staff? Not seeing any? Nope. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to receive the staff presentation. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by myself. All in favor? Councillor Ferguson's giving us a thumbs up. Thank you. That carries. So moving on to the agent, the owner's agent, we have Matt Johnson from Urban Solutions in attendance. Matt, if you want to activate your mic there. Yep.
Good morning, members of the committee.
Good morning.
If I can please just take a moment to share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
I can, yes.
Great, thank you. And good morning, members of the committee, staff, and the public. My name is Matt Johnston, a registered professional planner with Urban Solutions, and I'm joined by Mr. Charles Waugh of the Gateway Development Group, the proponent for the proposal before you today. Before we get into things, I'd like to just take a quick moment. As Councillor Wilson alluded, there has been a number of iterations of this plan, and it's been a great working relationship with City of Hamilton staff. So a special shout out and thanks to Mark Keeler, Shannon Mackay, Anita, and Steve in planning. Also like to thank the design review panel for a productive exercise there. Sandra Aldebag in development planning, or sorry, development engineering was also a great asset to us, along with her mentors, Binu and Tony Sergi. And again, thanks to Sandra Lucas and Brian Hollingworth, as the King Street corridor was a key consideration in this process. So thank you to them for their hard work as well. I won't dwell too much on the subject lands. I appreciate Shannon's great walkthrough of the neighborhood. As you now know, we are at the northeast corner of King and Paradise in the east end of Westdale. Again, Shannon gave a great overview of the surrounding area. We've got low-rise residential uses to the north, a multi-res to the east. We have multi-res to the south, where there's a 7-story multiple dwelling under construction now. And again, we have Food Basics to the southwest and Valentino's directly to the west there. As you know, we are proposing a 30-unit 6-story purpose-built student residential building with a ground floor retail component. We have 89 bicycle parking spaces, 10 short-term, 79 long, and all served by 20 parking spaces. Again, 11 at grade and 9 below. This proposal really marks a significant improvement in terms of what's on site today. Currently, as you know, there's 2 users. We have a fitness facility and a salon. What we're doing with this proposal is we're really taking an opportunity here to improve the site, where we go from about 1% landscaping to over 8% of softscape. We're introducing more than 11% of the site as pedestrian walkways and connections. We're reducing our at-grade parking from 67% of the site down to 39%, and we're improving lot coverage from 31% to 40%. So a really opportunity to take advantage of an underutilized site along the King Primary Corridor. An earlier version of this application or this proposal was considered by the development review team back in 2018 for formal consultation. That identified the need for the official plan amendment to address building height from 3 stories to 6, and to increase density up to 176 units per hectare. It also identified the need to further modify the existing zoning. While the existing use is permitted, the proposed zoning amendment introduces appropriate site-specific regulations to help control the massing in a context relevant to the site. The formal consultation process also confirmed a need for a complete range of supporting studies that included planning justification report, parking analysis, an urban design brief, record of site condition, functional servicing, noise, right-of-way impact, and a public consultation strategy. When Mr. Weil first brought this project to us, our office, we really were excited. We've got a great opportunity, as I alluded to improve an underutilized site, but we knew we had to be careful. And that's where we engaged Michael Spaziani of Michael Spaziani Architects. We're really one of the leaders in urban design. And we brought him to the team to help Rick Lintak of Hamilton here to really make sure we get this building done right. So with that, Mr. Spaziani went to work and really introduced the building step back component to ensure compatibility. We've got a 4-story podium with the step backs noted at the 5th and 6th stories, as Shannon alluded to. And what this did was really ensure that the massing respected the existing built form. We've got the angular plane scenarios from both the north and the south, really applying the corridor principles that the City of Hamilton has established. And in doing so, we're bringing forward a project that really fits the community while implementing the policy framework. So we have a few images of how this building can work with the surrounding community. Along the King Street facade, we've got an important commercial element right at the corner of King and Paradise, really improving that portion of King Street. It's a rather unique intersection with a lot happening, arguably an intersection in need of a bit of a road diet, but we did accommodate a right-of-way to ensure, or a right-of-way dedication to ensure we've got appropriate pedestrian connections along the street within the right-of-way. And we also have important design elements where we transition in materiality from a 4-story facade with another minor step back and a change in materiality to the 5th and 6th story. And in doing so, again, we really kind of respect that existing form and corridor. Just a couple other images of the facade that was in Shannon's proposal. These really illustrate some of the step backs, some of the changes in materiality. We have a cross section or elevation from Paradise Road showing the transition in building height that allows us to achieve that angular plane. As Shannon mentioned, we do have a policy framework that speaks to King Street being the primary corridor, where we have mixed-use medium density designations in both the urban structure, the land use designation in UHOP, as well as a medium density designation in the Ainsley Wood Westdale secondary plan. And as I mentioned, we really started this process back in 2018 with formal consultation. A few key take-homes from the chronology here is the July formal consultation, a December 2018 submission of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, a neighborhood information meeting in March of 2019, the design review panel in April of 2019, and also a number of key resubmissions where notable changes to the application were made. Throughout the whole process, public engagement was a key consideration. We launched a microsite that was available and circulated via social media and through planning staff, launched back in 2018, where we had all resources, all supporting materials in support of the application available to the public for review and download. We had an information meeting held in Westdale back on March 28th in 2019, where we had about 56 area residents out to learn more about the proposal. Again, we participated in the design review panel, and in total, our tally as of late yesterday was 38 letters highlighting concerns, but we also had 14 letters of support for the proposal. In direct response to the feedback we were getting, we made notable revisions over the course of the 2 years here. The initial proposal included communal rooftop terraces. Those were eliminated to respect privacy and overview concerns that were raised. As Shannon mentioned, we removed a 2-story wing that extended north along the Paradise frontage. That was thought to help with transition in height, but we welcome the feedback that came from residents and from the design review panel and removed that element. And then, although this is student purpose-built housing, we did come in with simply surface parking in anticipation of the proximity to McMaster. But in hearing the concerns, we then made the big and important decision to introduce an underground element, allowing us to increase the parking up to 20 spaces, where a total of 21 are required by the bylaw. And then one last important discussion was refining how waste was handled and providing real significant details on that waste pickup. And with that change, we were able to get a positive staff report towards planning committee. There's a few more details that we'll look forward to implementing at the site plan stage. That includes finalizing the materiality that we've discussed already with the transition up on the 5th and 6th story. We also look forward of introducing safety elements in the underground parking structure, ensuring that we apply SEPTED principles to make it a safe and comfortable environment. And then, of course, landscape details and the detailed engineering with regards to stormwater management and those typical site plan details. And with the changes we've made over the course of the proposal and the review process, we really feel that we're bringing forward an application that's compatible with the surrounding area, represents an appropriate form of intensification in its context within a built-up area. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan. The application generally conforms to the Urban Hamilton official plan and further implements the corridor objectives. And we also maintain the intent of the mixed-use zoning bylaw with appropriate site-specific requirements to control massing. And with these measures in place, we've got a proposal that in my view represents good land use planning. And that really concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So just take your share screen down. Thank you. And questions from committee. Is there any questions to Mr. Johnston? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston, and to Charles. I appreciate the work you've done in responding to the community's some of their concerns and the final product as delivered. I just wanted to review a few of those changes again and how you've sought to address them. I would like to begin at the back, if you would. I know there was a comment stated at the design review panel, and I realized that that was an earlier version of the plan, but there was a concern that there may not be enough room or sun for the planned trees that might provide a nice buffer between the single family homes along Glen and the development. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Right. The initial submission included a 1 meter landscape strip along the north property line. Through the review process, we were able to increase that landscape strip to now at a point where it can accommodate healthy and robust landscaping. So that will provide an appropriate transition. And then we also included, through Mr. Spaziani's input, a very sculpted element to the building stepbacks to ensure that we maintained the City of Hamilton requirements from a sun shadow perspective. So those 5-hour sun shadow criteria are maintained in those rear yards.
Thank you. So the setbacks begin, if you could walk through that again at the back, because you were hearing concerns about overlook and privacy. If you could just walk through that again. When do they begin to set back? At the 4th or the 5th floor, I believe. If you could just review that for the community who's listening, please. Thank you.
The initial proposal included a 2-story element that ran north along the Paradise frontage. And on top of that 2-story element included a communal terrace for an amenity area. And there were other communal terraces on the 4th and 5th portion of the building where you had those step backs. Those communal terraces were thought to be just additional amenity space. But as you know, we heard the concerns over privacy and overview, and those communal elements were removed. It was still thought to be important to include small private balconies for individual units. Mm-hmm. These balconies really serve a good purpose in terms of just providing a little bit of relief and somewhere for those tenants to step out, check the weather, get some fresh air, but still at a size that doesn't really allow for notable congregating. They're relatively small, but they still serve a good purpose. So that's the outdoor amenity space in response to the feedback. Mm-hmm. In terms of the building stepbacks, we're now 4 stories up along the north facade, where we introduce a step back to the 5th story and then a subsequent step back to the 6th story. And those help achieve that angular plane that helps control that massing, that helps ensure that the sun shadow principles are maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for detailing that and unpacking it. And thank you for the comments you made earlier that at present, part of this property includes an existing parking lot, which is not permeable, nor is it landscaped. And I think you're going from, you said, correct me, 1% soft scape to an over 8%. Can you confirm that for me, please, through you, Chair?
Yes, through the chair to the councillor. The site is got just shy of 1% softscape as it exists today. There's a sliver of a landscape strip that exists. The balance of it is paved, and then we've got the lot coverage with the existing buildings. Through the proposal, we're going to maintain just over 8% in terms of softscape. That's really the landscape strips that exist along the north and east property line. Then we do have walkways and pedestrian connections that represent another 11%. And the thought is that that 11% wraps around the building in its entirety. But also, we thought that the King Street interface at the street level was appropriately hardscaped, just in terms of the characteristics and the activity that's envisioned, that hardscape would be best in that location. And then we've got our lot coverage and surface parking representing balance. In terms of the question about permeability, we did have conversations just looking at best practices from a low impact development perspective that will be really further explored at the site plan level of detail.
Thank you. Just two questions, additional questions if I have time, Chair. You've referenced, I just wanted to pivot to the parking issue. You've referenced the need for a safety audit in its design or some sensitivity to that effect. I was wondering if you could unpack that, because full disclosure, we have spoken about it.
Right, through the chair to the councillor, anytime you're dealing with structured parking, below grade parking, we'd have to be mindful of safety. In this case, we're looking at purpose-built student residence. So we do have young adults using this facility, and there are best practices that can be applied to ensure safety and comfort. And for the most part, we can apply what's referred to as SEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design principles, to ensure that the parking structure is designed safely, that people feel safe and are safe. And again, those details are really site plan details that will be reviewed and implemented at that stage.
Thank you. They are site plan details. But for many of us, underground parking, while it does alleviate that awful streetscape of parking, it does present another risk, and that is out of sight, particularly for those who identify as female. So being sensitive to those lighting provisions, those sight lines, those need for mirrors, and pushing if I could say, the bicycle parking closer to any exits would be a very thoughtful design, in my opinion, and I appreciate your sensitivity to that. The rest of my questions will be following the delegations and specific to staff, but I appreciate you being here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further questions for Mr. Johnston? Committee, I'm not seeing any. Mr. Johnston, I just need to hear you say you're in favor of the staff report.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation from the owner's agent. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Councillor Partridge, I see you. Thank you. Is it affirmative? I don't see Councillor Farr. Just waiting for the tally. There we go. Thank you. Carries. And on the written submissions, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the written submissions. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by myself. All in favor?
It was Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Okay, we have pre-recorded delegations from Brendan McIntyre. We're just trying to fix the audio here. We did have bets whether this would work or not. We're just going to give clerks a minute to troubleshoot this. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on to a registered delegate, Ann Pollard, and then we're going to come back to the pre-recorded delegation once clerks get that sorted out. So at this time, I'm going to call on Ann Pollard if she's in the meeting to activate your microphone and video.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I see you now. Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you. So thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the presentations that went before me. I do look forward to hearing what Brendan McIntyre has to say. So I look forward to hearing that as well. So I have some still some remaining concerns and some comments that I would like to make. The first one I like to make clear. So this unsupervised student residence, correct in saying that this is unsupervised. How many students per unit are we expecting? Is that 4 students per unit? Because if that is, and I'm not sure where I got that number, 4 students per unit, it seems to me that there still is not sufficient parking. And if we're having 4 students per unit, and I think 30 units, it seems that we're going to end up with a lot of extra spillage of parking on the local streets. And we already have a parking problem in this neighborhood. And so I think that will do 2 things. One, it will decrease street parking that's available for residents. Most of us only have 1 parking space in our driveways. But also because it decreases street visibility. This whole corridor, that King Street West corridor, as well as the Glen Road corridor behind, is student traffic for small children going back and forth to Coots Paradise Elementary and Dalewood Elementary. So a large concern of mine is increased parking, which will decrease visibility on the street. Also, it will increase traffic, which decreases safety for children who are walking along that corridor. So that's a huge issue of mine. I am very appreciative that it seems, if I understand correctly, that all of the common open areas have been taken out of the plan. And I think that is extremely wise and sensitive. My family and I have lived next door to a student house for 25 years, which has open balconies. And for many of those years, we had a great deal of difficulty with students partying and creating noise and throwing garbage even from those balconies. So I still am concerned about there being any balconies on the north side. I did hear that they are small and don't encourage congregation, but people don't need a lot of encouragement to congregate. And so I am concerned about balconies on that side. I think that, sorry, getting back to the issue of traffic and student safety, child safety, I think that the city will have to look very, very seriously at more traffic calming measures. We've had some installed in this area, but it's taken many, many years to get crossing guards here and many years to get speed bumps. But I think that's going to have to be increased. And more crossing guards at more corners are going to have to be considered as well. So personally, I understand the need for more development in Westdale and understand the need for getting more people. I'm so sorry if it's going to be a student building, because I think that brings so many extra problems that just a regular apartment building or a set of condos might bring. But anyway, I think that's the end of my submission, and I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Anne. And I've noted down a number of questions that you've asked, and I'm sure Councillor Wilson will address those with staff following receiving all the delegations this afternoon. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Is there any questions for Ms. Pollard from committee? Not seeing any. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Councillor Ferguson. Thank you. So vote to receive the delegation. Thank you. And then we're going to try to go back to Councillor Farr, are you still with us? I see you. Thumbs up from Councillor Farr. Councillor Johnson, I don't see. Just waiting for the vote tally. We're having a Microsoft Tuesday. It's usually Microsoft Mondays. It's a leap Microsoft Monday. Sorry, everyone. We got to re-vote on receiving the delegation at a computer pickup. So if you don't mind just re-voting, I guess that includes me. Thank you. That carries unanimously. On to, we're going to go back to the pre-recorded delegation from Brendan McIntyre.
Hi there, Brendan McIntyre, resident of Ward 1. I wanted to make a public comment regarding the zoning of the proposed building for 804-816 King. I'm not sure this is what
we solved the audio.
Is a very successful business there already, a CrossFit gym, as well as a coffee shop, which is a focal point in the neighborhood. Demolition.
You just got to combine those two.
Hi there,
There we
Brendan
go.
McIntyre, resident of Ward 1. I wanted to make a public comment regarding the zoning of the proposed building for 804-816 King. Not sure this is what the neighborhood needs. There is a very successful business there already, a CrossFit gym, as well as a coffee shop, which is a focal point in the neighborhood. Demolishing that with, by the looks of it, some cheap student housing, I don't think will benefit the neighborhood. Also, if you're building that kind of housing with all those units, there isn't parking for every car that you're building, and it looks like it's going to be for students and not for affordable family housing, which I'd be all for. This doesn't seem to be the case, and if it is for students, these students in this neighborhood are all commuter students and they all have cars. Each one of them is going to need a parking space, or it's just going to spill out into the neighboring community as well. Not to mention the environmental impact and cost of destroying a perfectly good building to replace it with something else when there are still viable building lots available closer to Main Street. I'm thinking of a couple. And this sort of higher rise building would be much better suited, I think, closer to Main Street. Don't really see the point of this here, and yeah, definitely want to make my voice heard in this meeting, so thanks for your time.
Okay. Try that again. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the pre-recorded delegation. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Pearson, Councillor Pearson, you're good? Thank you. Thank you. It carries. And then, where are we here? We're going to close the public meeting. So I need a mover and seconder to close the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Partridge. All in favor? Councillor Johnson, were you able to vote? Thumbs up. Thank you. Carries. Thank you. So on to the staff report. And Councillor Wilson, I think you had some questions on the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Danko. I do. I'd like to begin my comments by saying I have read all written submissions related to this report, including those in the appendices, all or most of which date to mid-2019 and reflect the first iteration of this design. But nonetheless, they raise similar themes that have been set out in the correspondence that is included in the agenda today. So I would like to raise some questions on behalf of those delegations and wrap up by some concluding remarks. Most of the concern with the development, opposition, concern, hesitancy, stems from height, and everything falls from there, including privacy, overlook. With this density, the traffic that will be generated, concerns with safety, concerns with sun shadow, and with height, always a concern with precedence. What does it mean for the historic Westdale Village, which is so important, I think, to the city and certainly to the residents of Ward 1 and certainly to me. So if I could begin my questions on the issue of height and in relation to precedent of what this might mean moving west into the village. If I could ask Ms. Mackay-Shannon, I had asked you a question earlier, Shannon, about the King Street primary corridor, and if you could address that issue of where it starts, but where it ends, and what do we look for on primary corridors in terms of building form, building activity, because there were also concerns raised about why are we even providing for retail on that main floor. So if I could ask through you, Chair, to Shannon. Thank you.
Through the chair. So the King Street West primary corridor extends just past Paradise towards Longwood. It doesn't extend right to the Longwood intersection, but it does extend past the Paradise intersection. And so along that corridor is where the UHOP focuses the conversation about additional density and intensification. And again, the mixed-use medium density designation further implements that in this section as it relates to the Ainsleywood Westdale secondary plan. There is a height limitation for all of the lands designated mixed-use medium density, including these properties, limiting it to 3 stories. So during the review of this application, the consideration for the additional 3 stories proposed was based on impacts such as privacy, overlook, and sun shadow impacts, among other things. The corridor guidelines that apply help us as staff investigate the impacts of the proposed height, and that's how we had the proposal revised to incorporate additional setbacks and stepbacks to address things like transition, privacy, and overlook to mitigate those concerns. And so as Matt indicated in his presentation, and I demonstrated in my own presentation, those setbacks have been incorporated and things like privacy areas have been reduced in order to achieve the appropriate transition to the low density residential to the north. As it relates to the mixed use medium density designation, it is, while it allows residential development, it encourages that commercial mixed use type of use along the corridor. So that's where, that important commercial active streetscape is reiterated, and the policies direct staff to include that type of development along corridors to create active and vibrant streetscapes.
Thank you, Shannon, for that. Relatedly to height was a concern about sun shadow impacts. I know both Mr. Johnston and yourself in your presentation noted that it meets the city policy in that regard, but there was some question raised about the impact of, I think it was November to February, on the Paradise North on the east side and Glen on the south side. I think if you could you speak to what practice we use in assessing sun shadow and that part of our darker winter months, and if you could speak to that, please.
Through the chair, yes, the corridor guidelines specify when to measure the shadow impacts, and that is on March 21st. And it requires that there be 5 hours of sun access on March 21st. That usually translates into a similar shadow impact on September 21st on the equinox. So it improves, it improves between March and September. And then through the winter months, the shadow isn't assessed. That's a common best practice in terms of shadow impact studies.
Okay, so thank you through you, Chair. So what I heard you say is it meets the policy. It is the practice, and that's what we use to assess the application, and that's what we have to use because it is the policy. Okay. On the issue of there were issues raised about the daylight triangle and concerns about sight lines and a concern that it was deviating from what some residents think is an industry standard or an expectation from maybe 12 by 12 down to what staff is allowing for a 3 by 3. And I was wondering if you or another member of staff could speak to that concern and the why you approved it as it is.
Through the chair, I can speak to what what transportation planning did approve through the process, which was a reduction to a 4.5 by 7 by 4.57 daylight triangle at the corner of King and Paradise.
Thank you.
As to why it was reduced, that may be better addressed by transportation planning.
Chair, is there someone from Transportation Plan? Oh, hi, Mr. Hollingworth.
Hello, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. Yes, that is correct. We allowed for a reduced daylighting triangle in this case. To be clear, we look at two considerations. One is visibility triangles, which are really about safety and sight lines, and daylighting triangles are about providing extra space at the corner for things like traffic signals, signage, poles, utilities, etc. And in this case, we deemed that a smaller triangle would be acceptable. We sometimes do that without setting precedent in more tighter urban areas, given the urban design context. We did, I might add, work with the applicant to obtain additional right-of-way along King Street to allow for a wider sidewalk, which we think is a positive benefit for the neighborhood.
Thank you. I think that's a tremendous positive benefit. Thank you, Mr. Hollingworth. Okay, so you assessed it. You were looking for visibility. You were looking, that's the visibility triangle, if I could just summarize what I heard. And the daylighting is to allow that extra space for signage, poles, and utilities. But of course, we are in an existing urban setting. And so you signed off on the smaller triangle, but you also got a wider public realm in terms of a sidewalk in return. Is that an accurate layperson summary?
Through the chair, yes, that's accurate.
Okay.
It dates back to 2019.
Thank you. Okay, so the other thing, thank you, that stems, of course, what we heard about a lot, and I am sympathetic to it in Westdale and Ainsley Wood. There are always issues with parking. It is, for those of you who may not be familiar, it's far cheaper to incur a weekly, if not twice a week, parking ticket in Westdale and Ainsley Wood than it is to pay for on-campus parking and take your chances. So if I could, through you, Chair, to, I guess it would be Mr. Hollingworth again, if you could speak to the requirements for parking in relation to, or Shannon, the commercial space. These folks are under a certain gross floor area, and what that means for their parking requirements for the on-ground commercial, and what it means, what they've done also for the residential portion. If I could, through you, Chair.
So through the chair, as I stated in my presentation, they are providing 20 parking spaces. The previous proposal included 13 at-grade parking spaces, and the proposal has been amended to include additional parking. The zoning bylaw 05200 for retail area under 450 square meters doesn't typically require commercial parking spaces to be provided. It was the applicant who requested that commercial parking be included in the proposal, and so 2 parking spaces have been proposed to be dedicated to the commercial area, with the remaining being dedicated for residential uses. So this is the applicant's wish in terms of meeting what they perceive to be the commercial parking demand that will be on site, and to alleviate some of the on-street parking that may occur as a result of the new commercial area.
Thank you. So in summary, they've added commercial parking where they didn't have to, and they went from 13 to 20. I think, sorry, the requirement was 23?
Yes, the required parking was 23.
Okay, thank you. I noticed there are the virtual delegation raised concerns about what the impact it was going to have on the existing commercial activities. I obviously can't comment on that. That's not on the agenda. However, I do note that there on the letters today, Chair, there are a number of letters, including one of those very commercial actors, a coffee shop, who are supportive of it. And the reason they are supportive of it, I'm surmising from reading it, is that they think it will bring additional patrons into the area, and they think that's good for business. I don't have any comments, and I'm not particularly good at faking comments. I just want to reassure the residents that I have been following the file. I have been reading all of the emails, and I can say this. I could ask Shannon this, but it would be a faux question because I know the answer. We cannot zone at this part of our development phase for use. So I understand in Westdale and Ainsley Wood that there is concern about student housing. I read the comments that they would prefer it be housing for families or housing for seniors. I absolutely agree that we need more housing for both of those demographics. But this is a private property, and it's not within our purview to dictate who lives in the development. And I also understand the issue. Believe me, I do understand the issue with concerns about what bringing new residents and therefore maybe new cars and congestion into Westdale, which is an award-winning community designed specifically for walkability, might mean for children. And in response to that, I guess I could say the following. We're not going to address the inadequate street design, particularly in the lower city, by halting other people from coming in or from increasing density. We know that the lower city particularly has been sliced and diced to accommodate the automobile, one single usage. And the only way we're going to enhance safety for our children and our other vulnerable users like seniors is to try and shift away from that dominance of the car. And that means investing in public transit. That means supporting LRT. That means making more room on our streets for other users. We're not going to be able to address those overwhelming safety concerns by focusing on the density issue, in my opinion. So what we've been doing in the Ward 1 office, Chair, is going through every street, every intersection, and working from schools and parks outward. And we will soon be having an entire matrix of where we're going to start focusing on those design issues for safe streets. And that's our commitment. It may not satisfy everyone, but it's going to be a process that's going to be transparent and visible and it will have its primary focus on the migration of children as they make their way around our community. The issue with student housing is a tricky one in West Hamilton, Chair. In the absence of providing for purpose-built student housing, we're going to have students overwhelmingly living in those single-family dwellings in our neighborhoods. And I understand that's not in and of itself a problem. It's one thing that we've noticed over the last year in this pandemic is how much we actually miss the students and the vibrancy and the youth that they bring, and also the dollars that they bring. But what we don't miss is an overwhelming concentration and some of the property standard issues and some behavioral issues associated with it. So the reason for these primary corridors is to bring that density along those corridors, and purpose-built student housing will enable and offer a safe, clean, purpose-built environment for those students, so they have a choice, I hope, of moving out of some of those single-family residents and allowing single families to move in. I do share an issue with what may be arising is an affordability issue for students when we get higher end student housing at one end and some of the cheaper, less safe, less secure housing on the other end. And that's why I believe very strongly that we need that rental housing bylaw in wards 1 and 8 and I believe 14. And I think McMaster has a role and responsibility in advocating for that affordable housing for students as well. So I'm going to support the application. I certainly understand the reservations that come with change and with the added height beyond that which is allowed in the secondary plan. This is a difficult site to build on. It's very shallow, but I appreciate the effort that Charles has made in listening to the residents to provide for those step backs to address issues with privacy and overlook. And I think we have to shift to being accommodating of greater density, not with a blank check. It has to be quality design as best as we can get it through the tools that we have. But this is a King West primary corridor to allow for that greater activity, both commercial and living along that corridor. And let's keep at chipping away at making our streets safer, less hostile for pedestrians and cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further discussion on the staff report from committee? Not seeing any. Thank you. So I need a mover and a seconder that the public submissions were received and considered by the committee in approving the application. By Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Farr. Thank you. Favor or opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. And finally, I need a mover and a seconder to approve the report recommendations as amended. Moved by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Farr again. All in favor? Councillor Johnson, are you able to vote? Oh, we got you. Thank you. And unanimously. Thank you, committee. Our next item on the agenda is 9.2, an application for approval of draft plans of condominium for lands located at 20 Southridge Court and 533 Sanatorium Road in Hamilton in Ward 14. Does the committee wish to see the staff presentation on this? No. Councillor Wilson? Yes? Okay. So we have Melanie Schneider.
Good morning, committee. My name is Melanie Schneider, Planner 2 with City of Hamilton and Development Planning. I am just going to get my presentation ready. And we'll be ready to go momentarily. Okay. Okay. So good morning, Chair, members of committee, staff, and public in attendance. As I said, my name is Melanie Schneider, planner with the City of Hamilton, and I am here to discuss the draft plans of condominium applications for lands located at 20 Southridge Court and 533 Sanatorium Road in Hamilton. These lands are located on the lands formerly used as the Shadok Hospital and are located on the north side of Shedmack Drive and the west side of Sanatorium Road. Here you can see additional lands owned by the applicant up here, which are subject to a separate official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application, which is scheduled to be presented to the April 6th Planning Committee, which is our next following meeting. This image shows an aerial view of the site. Here you can see the buildings formerly used as the Shadok Hospital and surrounding land uses, including a multiple dwelling just up to the north, which is under construction right now. There are block townhouses also to the north, and then a range of institutional uses surrounding the site as well. The lands are just south of the Brownlands and the Niagara Escarpment. And since this aerial photo has been taken, most of the buildings have been demolished to allow for development of this site. The proposed draft plans of condominium seek to establish tenure and are comprised of 2 phases. Phase 1, which is the left side of the site here, provides access from Southridge Court down at this corner here, and is comprised of a private road network, common elements for landscaping, visitor parking, and access purposes. And the condo as well will support 107 street townhouses having frontage on this private road network. Phase 2 provides access from Sanatorium Road, just right here, and is comprised again of a private road network integrated with Phase 1. Common elements consisting of park amenities, landscaping, and visitor parking areas. And again, this condo will support 104 street townhouses having frontage on this private road network. The associated site plan for both condo applications received conditional approval on September 17, 2018, which proposes a total of 211 street townhouses having frontage on this road network. The site plan control application has to be in conformity with the Hamilton zoning bylaw number 05200 and is also consistent with the minor variance applications HMA 18408 and HMA 2154. Draft approval for these applications are subject to standard conditions of approval and special conditions, such as reciprocal easements and joint use agreements between phases 1 and 2, a development agreement to ensure that the townhouse units have legal interest into the common element condominium, installation of communal mailboxes on site, warning clauses advising maintenance requirements for private on-site sanitary and storm sewer infrastructure, noise warning clauses for specific units, and requirement to create parcels for the street townhouses through a part lot control application, and that the site be in conformity with the approved site plan application. So here are some photos of the site. This image shows the subject lands from Shedmack Drive looking north. As you can see, compared to the aerial that I had previously up, demolition has already taken place to facilitate the approved development through the site plan application. Here you can also see the residential uses to the north, so a multiple dwelling which is just finalizing construction, as well as those block townhouses I pointed out earlier. Here we see the lands to the south, which is it's a medical equipment facility or sales facility. And then here shows the southerly extent of the lands, again, from the south, showing the existing access. Here shows the westerly portion of the lands looking to the east. This is the location of the driveway access from phase 1 from Southridge Court to facilitate the proposed development. And then here shows the lands to the west, which is an existing community center, which includes an ice rink. And this image shows the sales center on site for the proposed development. This particular building is located on the southeast corner of the subject lands. This image shows the lands to the both on the west and on the east. So the left-hand side of this slide shows the lands to the northwest, those block townhouses we saw earlier, and then on the east of the subject lands, we see an existing institutional use. Here we're looking at the easterly portion of the lands looking north. This building at the back is those additional lands owned by the applicant, and again, subject to a separate official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. Those lands are addressed 555 Sanatorium Road. And then here we're looking at the southeast existing uses. So 630 Sanatorium Road, again, additional institutional uses surrounding the site. And then this image is slightly more north of that previous photo. Again, an educational establishment. And then again, here's another image of those lands subject to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. Here you can see that the building is scheduled to remain on site. And then we also have tree protection measures already installed in site as part of the demolition requirements. And then again, this is the northerly extent of the site. So again, that southern building, 555 Sanatorium. And then this building on the left is not owned by the applicant, but it is the northerly extent of the lands. And then again, lands outside of the application, just showing the existing context. So the proposed draft plans of condominium have merit and can be supported as they are consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and they comply with the Urban Hamilton official plan. Prior to registration, the proposed draft plans of condominium must demonstrate that they conform to the zoning bylaw number 05200 and implement the approved site plan application DA 17170. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Are there any questions for staff from the presentation? Seeing any? You just don't mind unsharing your screen, Melanie? Thank you. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Melanie, how have consultations with the ward councillor been to date? I spoke with him yesterday on another matter, and I know certainly he's been engrossed for many years on this file. So a quick summation there.
Through the chair to the councillor, we did reach out to Councillor Whitehead several times on this application. We didn't receive any responses from him on the circulation.
More recently with what's before us. Okay. But in the past, I'm not sure if you're a fairly new planner to this file. In the past, he's been pretty engaged.
Through the chair to the committee, my involvement in this particular project has been with the draft plan of condominium. I have not been involved too much in the site plan application, so I wouldn't be able to speak to that particular history.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks so much, Melanie. Great presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Ferguson, do I see you?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. And Councillor White has asked me to represent him on the west side of Ward 14. This is very close to my former limit. And I too was concerned about it. I've been speaking to his assistant. I don't want to bother Terry. but she didn't indicate that there's any pushback on this. This seems like a routine thing just for they're forming the condominium corporation. It's already been rezoned. In fact, I believe it's already been built. So I don't anticipate there will be any objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or discussion with staff? Not seeing any. So I need a mover and a seconder to receive the staff presentation. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Farr. That carries. Thank you. It's too fast. I didn't see it. We have Diana Morris from T. Johns Consulting in attendance. Diana? There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, and staff. My name is Diana Morris, Senior Planner at T. Johns Consulting Group, acting agent on behalf of the owner. Due to an issue that arose yesterday, we are asking that the application be deferred and be brought back to the April 16th Planning Committee agenda in order to resolve the issues with staff.
Okay. Sorry, can you repeat the date, Diana?
April 6th?
April 6th.
Yes, please.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, just to Deanna, staff didn't mention they had any issues when they just completed their presentation. Could you just explain to us what the issues are?
Yeah, there was an issue that came up yesterday regarding the joint use agreement between legal and staff. Further details, I think we just need to resolve some of the additional issues and get further clarification. So hence we're asking for deferral today in order to resolve some of those issues.
Yeah, I have no trouble moving the referral. I'm just curious to know what they are. Melanie, or if I can I ask the question to staff now, or would you rather wait till we receive Diana's presentation?
Through the chair to the committee member, this was a very last minute request from the applicant. So further to Diana's request, the time between now and the April 6th Planning Committee, we can use just to hammer out any of those concerns with the applicant to ensure that the recommendation brought forward to you is most appropriate.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to move the deferral at the appropriate time.
Thank you. So we'll just receive the presentation, or sorry, the delegation from the agent, and then we'll put your motion to defer on the floor. So motion to receive the delegation, moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. And then Councillor Farr, motion to defer this item to the April 6th, 2021 Planning Committee agenda. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Farr. The defer. Thank you. And the item is deferred.
Thank you.
You skip a couple pages. Okay, we are on to our delegations respecting item 10.1. So these are delegations for the property standards bylaw. We have a virtual delegation from Veronica Gonzalez.
From the residents? We're still dealing with it.
Who's, I think that was Mr. Robichaud, unmuted there.
My apologies, sir.
No problem. So Veronica, are you in the meeting?
Hi, yes, I am. Thank you.
Go.
Thank you, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Danko and city staff and city councilors. My name is Veronica Gonzalez. I'm the chair of Acorn's Mountain Chapter and tenant in Ward 8. I'm delegating today in support of the staff report to amend Hamilton's property standards bylaw. Acorn stands for Association of Community for Reform Now. Acorn is an independent national organization of low to moderate income families with 140,000 members plus and 20 plus neighborhoods chapters across 9 cities. Acorn Canada was founded in 2004 and the first chapter in Hamilton in 2017. In Hamilton, we have 3 chapters, downtown, East End, and on the mountain. Acorn advocates for social and financial justice at all levels of government. I attend Mountain Chapter meetings every month. We have new tenants approaching us at every meeting. The issues in substandard living and renovations don't stop, and the situations for tenants get more fragile. When someone else owns your home, you don't have much control, even if you have your rights to have a healthy home. This is the reason why we need precise and strong bylaws and regulations. We have experienced and seen across our membership the substandard conditions that tenants have and are still living in, including tenants that have moved into renovated units, repairs that only are bandaged, don't go away. In my unit, I'm expected to have a sewage backup flood every 2.5 years. My insurance at the moment is $63 per month, and it will increase every time this sewage issues happen. And also, every tenant must pay insurance right now. I have to replace my belongings to get that got damaged. It's an unnecessary experience and costly to my pocket and the environment, if you know what I mean. Imagine all those people that have to go through an infestation over and over again. Every time replacing their belongings or not, because who can afford to replace them so many times? And imagine the psychological and social impact this has on families with kids living there. It's to put you in depression. Another issue I constantly hear is mold from leaky windows, the same mold I had in my unit by my window. My issues were partly solved. They had to take the seal that compounded over the years and resealed it with proper seal. This only got solved because I contacted Acorn and stayed firm and did my research on mold. And also I have some knowledge from being a graduate on architectural program from Mohawk College. But even having knowledge, it is a real fight to get things done properly and for property management to listen to you and not blame you for these building issues that existed when I moved in. It was a struggle mentally and socially, and it affected my everyday life. The repairs in my neighbor go on the same mold issue, was just a replacement of drywall and trim. Bylaws and regulations from our municipalities are our tools to defend these type of situations. Another situation with an Acorn member at 816 Concession Street, their intercom system is broken, mailbox are not maintained, common areas and hallways don't get cleaned. Same with 1977 Mohawk Road. And landlords have issued N13 notices to all tenants for demolition and renovations. Our health depends on living in a healthy environment. For homeowners, you know what will happen if you don't repair to a standard. If you don't replace your roof after 5 years or so, you know what could happen. If you don't replace the ceiling and eventually change your windows, you know what will happen in your home. If you have mold, if you get mold, you know exactly what to inspect for. We are tenants, and just because we don't own our own property doesn't mean we get to live in these substandard conditions. It is a profitable business when tenants keep moving. We know this as a fact. We see it. However, this business serves the public, and it needs to be regulated just like other businesses who serve the public. It's been a process to get to where we are, and tenants have been put on the streets and have suffered illness during this process. We are advocates for one another. You're also somewhat of an advocate yourselves. You serve in a municipality who represents by the public. We do similar work, and I want to give a special thanks to those city councilors and staff personnel who have met with us and have taken a step into listening and doing something about it. I also want to thank our ACON members across the city for speaking up on these issues, your hard efforts, courage, and for your volunteer work and commitment. On behalf of ACORN members and myself, we are in support of Councillor Jason Farr's motion. Also, I want to thank you for listening to me on my delegation.
Thank you, Veronica. Are there any questions for the delegate? Councillor Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Veronica. You did a terrific job just now as a delegate and earlier today as a host of ACORN's first ever virtual press conference. I found that out after the fact. I had no idea I was invited as a guinea pig. But thank you to you and to Olivia and Dana and the media that attended virtually as well. In that press conference, you didn't mention it in your delegation, but there was one item from the list in the report that hasn't been transferred onto the motion that we'll be dealing with shortly. That was pests and vermin. You brought that up earlier. Maybe you could share with the committee what it was that you shared with us in the virtual press conference earlier. And at the same time, I'll let you know through the chair that at the appropriate time today, we'll definitely confirm my assumption, I think, with staff. But first, what was that about?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. We know the current problem with pests in building, and this could be, you know, for various reasons. The issue, it's a big concern in many ways, including, you know, people that have to replace all their items and, you know, and over again. You really can't afford it. And when you're living with no furniture and you know, with these bugs, it affects people mentally. No doubt about it. We've seen it across our members, and it's affected them. You know, they get very emotional, and also another thing is we are in a climate crisis, and these type of infestation only increase in a climate crisis. We have the tick issue that are rising with a warmer climate. These ticks are going to be living more because it's their environment, right? So, you know, like we need to, in my view, and listening to our members, like we need to stop pointing fingers at tenants on these issues. Buildings need to be properly maintained and properly repaired, because these bugs are getting into the units somehow, and actually somehow is through holes that have not been closed in, you know. So it's an issue that we need to address for the health and safety of the members.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Among others that we spoke about earlier, and of course you've been advocating for since 2017 here in Hamilton. My assumption, Mr. Chairman, is that I believe pests and vermin are already covered through property standards and municipal, might even be through health, but we'll get that clarity at the appropriate time. Thanks again, Veronica. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to receive all the delegations together at the end. So we're going to go on to our pre-recorded delegations. So the first is from Diana Sparkles. Sorry, is it Sparks? I'm sorry, Diana.
Good morning, City Councilors. My name is Dana Sparks, and I am the chair of the East End chapter of Hamilton Acorn. Back in 2018, Acorn had released a report on the state of disrepair that apartment buildings in the city of Hamilton face, which included our citywide tenant survey, which found 59% of tenants have issues getting their landlords to do needed repairs. This is unacceptable. As time goes by, more and more tenants are confronted with repairs not being completed by landlords, and our current property standard bylaws do not cover an abundance of issues our tenants are facing. In 2020, Acorn worked with Councillor Terry Whitehead on a motion to have bylaw staff review the property standards of other jurisdictions in search of improvements that could be brought to Hamilton. This allowed Acorn over the past year to participate in the consultation for the review. The resulting staff report that came is asking that there be amendments incorporated into the property standards bylaw current to Hamilton. These amendments include appliances being kept in good repair, mail collection areas, common areas and hallway cleanliness, garbage chutes being washed and disinfected, ventilation systems being cleaned, floors and walls with similar finishes upon repair, cupboards, fixtures, and faucets in good repair, intercoms and security locking. Acorn supports the staff's reports amendment, the staff reports amendments in the effort of improving Hamilton property standards. These improvements cover so many more health and safety concerns that have become serious matters amongst rental housing that our tenants face. Many of you may ask why Hamilton's property standards need to cover all the health and safety issues that tenants are faced with. One significant reason is that countless landlords stop doing repair work as a tactic, knowing that bylaw cannot do anything in response and combine the use of rent evictions. This causes tenants notable mental anguish and physical illness, not to mention unsafe living conditions. I, for example, have kitchen cupboards that are falling apart. A cupboard door fell off and they are not attached properly. I requested that they repair the cupboards, especially as I have 4 children who could be seriously injured if the door was to fall off again, and the response they gave me was no. This has caused me to become anxious, not only because I'm afraid someone in my family could get hurt, but also because it sets a precedent that the landlords will refuse to do the work. What are tenants supposed to do in these instances? We should be able to call Hamilton by law enforcement. Many of the proposed amendments can turn into dangerous situations. We have had instances where bylaw officers make the suggestion that tenants should go to the landlord-tenant board for these issues. That does not work for many reasons. Unbeknownst to many, there is a cost of filing an application against a landlord at the LTB, and scores of tenants cannot afford to have legal representation like landlords can. Filing against a landlord is a lengthy process, especially due to the current pandemic. It can take months to receive a hearing, and the board is not prioritizing applications against landlords currently. Imagine your stove stops working, your landlord refuses to fix it or replace it, and you have to wait months for a hearing. Also, in the off chance that the board issues an order for the landlord to do the repairs, they have no way of enforcing it. It is a vicious cycle because the tenant would have to continually file applications against the landlord. It is a situation that forces tenants to live in substandard housing conditions, and as I stated before, it impacts people's physical and mental health. Social interactions are also substantially affected. Acorn spoke to many tenants pre-COVID who are embarrassed of their living conditions of their apartment or building, so they do not invite people over. This is especially true of landlords who refuse to do pest treatment as well, which realistically can cause outbreaks of pests like bed bugs or cockroaches around the city as they latch onto clothing and items like that. It becomes a financial burden on tenants if they have to do the repairs or get the pest treatments and they're already paying rent. I am a tenant who has had bed bugs. I had to continually argue with my landlord to have pest treatment, and even though they eventually did it, it cost me a lot of money to be able to bag my items and prepare my home. There are just endless problems with the system currently in place. It is vital that property standards are improved and the proposed amendments are approved. It is the next important step in ensuring tenants have healthy, secure, and safe housing that everyone is entitled to. The next important step to follow, we need proactive enforcement of property standards and protection from rent eviction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next virtual delegation is Kathy Johnson.
Councilors and planning committee staff. My name is Kathy Johnson. I'm a member of Acorn's downtown chapter and tenant at 150 Houston Street South. Today, I'm delegating in support of improving Hamilton's apartment property standards to cover all the health and safety issues tenants face. I have lived at 150 Houston Street South since 2012. When I first moved in, the kitchen cabinets and drawers were broken. Only this year, she decided to finally repair them. After persistent pressure from Acorn members in the building for 2 years. Maintenance of kitchen cupboards is not currently in Hamilton bylaws. My bathroom faucet was broken for 6 months. The common areas and hallways are rarely cleaned. The hallways, the laundry room, and ventilation never clean or on. She hasn't followed couple health recommendations, such as setting up a sanitation station, and also the mask signage is only at one area. She's supposed to have them in common areas such as laundry room, elevators, and hallways. I bring up these issues because they are not currently covered by Hamilton bylaw. Acorn and tenants have worked with bylaw to get some issues fixed in building, for many issues remain. Tenants deserve healthy homes. While covering these issues is an important next. Stronger enforcement is needed. Tenants in the buildings are terrified to speak up. Myself and other Acorn members in the building have been targeted with eviction and harassment. The landlord gave me an eviction notice for drying my clothes in my unit. My eviction. I refuse to dry my clothes in a dryer because sometimes the dryers are broken and some fine clothing I refuse to put them in the dryer. She thinks they're causing mold. I never complained about mold in my unit. We need proactive enforcement so that the health and safety issues are dealt with annually, not allowed to continue for years. Thank you for listening.
That's a banging Black Velvet Elvis in the background there. Thank you. Our next.
Hello, City Councilor. My name is Juan Balan.
There we go. He's introduced himself.
Hello, City Councilor. My name is Juan Balandra. I'm a tenant of Melvin Avenue, and I've been a member of Acorn, East Hamilton chapter for the last 3 years. So I'm speaking today in support of amending Hamilton's property standards to include more health and safety issues that we tenants face every day. I have lived at 295 Melvin Avenue, apartment 101 for the last 3 years. And I share a bedroom apartment with a roommate. The reason I chose this place is because I was going through some hard times. So I needed someone to share the rent. So I was only paying $850 back then. And it seemed like the perfect opportunity to save some money so I can eventually get my own place. For the past 3 years, we have ongoing issues with the landlord refuses to repair and to do base maintenance. Basically, the main problem I had is that 3 days after I moved in, water started coming out of the floors. I told the manager, and it took him like around a week to fix a broken pipe. So he told me he had taken care of the issue. There was no more water coming. However, the floors were damaged. So all the flooring on my apartment now is damaged. There are cracks. And I work with a cane, so a few times it gets stuck, and I had accidents because of that. He doesn't seem to care. He says that he's going to fix it when and if I move out. A few weeks later, after I moved out, I noticed that there were some bed bugs. I noticed there were bed bugs growing from the walls. So I mentioned to him right away, and he told me that the place had been fumigated already, that there's nothing he was going to do about it, and that most likely I brought the pest from my previous residence. And after that, I've been trying for the last 3 years to have this place, not only my apartment, but all the building, to have it fumigated properly. He refused to do that. The most I can get is somebody to do a fumigation once a year. And when they do their fumigation, they said, okay, we're going to come back in 2 or 3 weeks to do the second time. And if the place requires, one more time, we'll come back for a third time. However, they never seem to come back. And when I talked to the landlord about that, he claims that I canceled their visits, or my roommate canceled the visits. That is not true. Where one time we waited for 3 weeks for the guy to show up, and so the more he can do it, to fumigate each apartment, I don't know, once a year. And the problem is that all the apartments have the same problem, so it has to be done at once for a long period of time, so maybe he can get rid of this problem. Another problem we have is with the buzzer. The buzzer it doesn't work. And I live on the first floor, and so during the summer, I guess, the ambulance shows up, and I have the police or the paramedics just banging on my window at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I have no friends, I have no family here, so obviously someone is banging on my window. I'm thinking, this has to be a criminal, trying to get in. So anyways, it really affects the quality of my life, having people banging on my window once or twice a week during the summer. And whenever I said to the landlord that he needs to fix the intercom, he says that there's nothing he can do about it. So all those little details have been adding up to the quality of my life, and that affect my work performance, and I think it's really affecting the way of life, not only mine, but everybody in this building. People already are, giving up because basically there is no answer from him. He has 4 or 5 different numbers, so every issue has to be sent to different numbers, and he only shows up on the first to collect the rent. And now he wants the rent cash. I don't know why, but I used to send I used to do money transfer every time. Now I have to give him cash on top of everything else. So I think that elite management refused to maintain and keep this building, and is basically affecting the life and health of everybody. And now during COVID-19, instead of having someone cleaning, every day the common areas, basically nothing is being done. And I think that the health of everybody is more important than people saving money. Thank you very much for your time.
So those are our pre-recorded delegations, and then there was one written delegation from Ali Nargani. So we're going to receive all of them together. Need a mover and a seconder to receive the delegations. Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. On to item 10.1, which is the property standards bylaw review. Full comparison. Just to put this on the floor, I need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Is there any discussion on 10.1? Councillor Farr.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just the one question, as I mentioned with Veronica, through you to Ken, on page 2 of 3, we reference pest and vermin control. And the motion that will follow this and what the report on page 3 of 3 suggests, that we can address the following areas, including the staffing and financial impacts of adding these areas to the bylaw. We omit pest and vermin control. The rest of it is covered as suggested through the vast engagement that was a response to our original request through this committee. So I assumed in a press conference a little earlier, and I reiterated that today with Veronica, that that's because pest and vermin is already covered through some municipal enforcement, but I want not to assume. I'd rather be assured. So could you speak to that? Ken.
Who's it? Ken. Who's Ken? There you are.
Director Leenderts.
Director Leenderts.
For now.
For another few days. Go ahead. We can't hear your audio, Director Leenderts.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, just have to unplug once in a while. Through you, Mr. Chair, in relation to this report, property standards currently looks after ants infestation. But the vermin such as rats and mice and bed bugs is generally looked after by public health. And so there is a bylaw in place in those areas. But we are currently working with public health and creating a separate pest bylaw that would look after integrated pest management. So traditionally, we wouldn't include pests or vermin in a property standards bylaw, though ants are included. And we are looking at bringing back a separate pest bylaw for this specifically. But right now, it is covered under public health. And but we are working collectively with public health to bring back a separate bylaw for pests.
All right, thank you. Chair Danko, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to wish Ken the very best and a well-deserved retirement from this, the second of his careers here in Hamilton. But in case I don't, I just want to thank the director for years of great dialogue, and this is a perfect example, this report, of following up on a council motion and getting his team out there and engaged with all the appropriate stakeholders and coming back in a timely fashion and addressing the important issues that he does as our licensing director. So if I went a little long there, that's okay. He deserves it. But just in case I didn't get a chance, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that answer and all of your years of service in both Hamilton Police Services and, of course, with us here at the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on 10.1 from committee? Not seeing any. So this was moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Wilson to receive the report. All in favor? Got everybody? Thank you. That carries. And then, Councillor Farr, you have a motion on this this issue.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Thank you. I move this. You second it, Chair Danko, and it's to amend the property standards bylaw 20-221 to include health and safety concerns in rental houses and apartments. The whereases are there. They indicate things like a Building Code Act in 92 that authorizes us to do this, to amend our bylaws. It talks about maintenance and occupancy of property that we amended September 15th, 2010. We've had many amendments since. This is the latest. There have been concerns about health and safety with rental houses and apartments within the city, amplified, I might add, by the great work of Acorn. There's a whereas in there that talks about our continuous improvement efforts as staff in the city of Hamilton and as mandated by council over the years. And stakeholders also mentioned in the whereas many consulted, as the report that we just approved indicated or received indicated. So areas of improvement that we've identified through that report and that consultation and good engagement with everybody from landlords to other stakeholders that are renters to community organizations and neighborhood groups, and obviously Acorn, who worked on this for some years, got us to this. Therefore, be it resolved that the licensing and bylaw services staff, in consultation with legal services, be directed to bring forward a bylaw to amend the property standards bylaw to reflect the areas for improvement found in the information report, property standards bylaw review, and municipality comparisons. And of course, we're speaking to, as referenced just a little bit earlier, amending our enforcement bylaw, beefing it up essentially to allow enforcement on these 8 items: intercoms and security locking, appliances kept in good repair, mail collection areas, common areas, hallways, cleanliness, garbage chutes washed and disinfected, ventilation systems cleaned, floors, walls, similar finishes upon repair. You heard a lot of talk about mold issues with some of our delegates, and cupboards, fixtures, faucets in good repair. Beefing up at this time, Mr. Chair, if I may very briefly, our property standards bylaw as it relates to rental units, I think is very, very important. I think the delegates spoke quite eloquently as to the reasons why, so I'll simply say that good tenants deserve the peace of mind to have healthy and safe environments, and that when they want those issues addressed, they also, good tenants, deserve not to be ignored. And if ignored, good tenants deserve our support as a council and as our bylaw enforcement staff to go on and get after those issues in a timely and efficient manner so that those tenants can have the peace of mind knowing that they're protected as it relates to themselves and their families' health and safety. And finally, thank you to you for seconding. I was initially the seconder on the motion that sought these extra enforcement tools, ultimately brought forward by Councillor Whitehead, who sat with Acorn about 1.5 years ago. It helped us acknowledge that this is not just one of those issues that any one councillor could suggest to the tenant, maybe you need to get in touch with the landlord tenant board. This is a number of issues that we could indeed add to beefed up property standards bylaw as it relates to renters and deal with it municipally instead of the onerous, time consuming, especially now during the pandemic, as our delegates noted, and somewhat costly approach to addressing it through the Landlord Tenant Act. I myself must admit to being guilty to on occasion in the past on some of these listed items, having said to a tenant, this is something where you may want to proceed, and oftentimes contacting that tenant or those tenants in the past, some years ago, with the Hamilton Legal Clinic. So to help them through that. But in this case, what we're doing here, as recognized by Councillor Whitehead with his work with Acorn and other tenants across the city, is, taking care of our own right here at home. And so I really appreciated his initial work, having been seconder on his motion that got us the report today, and ultimately that led to this motion where I'm hopeful that we get some unanimous support. And I know from the press conference earlier, Acorn's also hopeful for that too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion that is on the floor from committee? Not seeing any. If I could just turn over the chair briefly to you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you.
Go
Just
ahead.
a couple. Thank you. Just a couple quick comments from me. You know, recognizing the work that staff's put into this, doing the scan of other similar municipalities. In my opinion, it really is kind of common sense of adding these things to the municipal bylaw and not having them not having tenants have to resort to the landlord tenant board for things like simply keeping the intercom working or appliances in good repair or you know, state of cleanliness in common areas and garbage chutes and ventilation systems and things like that, which are essential to the quality of life of tenants who are living in the buildings. And you know, I always have to remind myself when it comes to tenant landlord issues that that this is a rental business, and you know, placing the onus on the tenants, and you know, a lot of times the landlords blame the tenants that they're not taking care of the units, or that it's the tenant's fault. But you know, they're still operating a for-profit rental business, and those components of the unit that we just spoke about are essential to the people living there, and it's their onus as the business owner to keep that in good repair and good cleanliness and state of good operation. So I'm looking forward to incorporating this into our bylaws so that tenants don't have to go through that very onerous, tedious, and lengthy process of resorting to the landlord-tenant board for resolution of some of these issues. It really is unfortunate that as a municipality we have to take this step, but the fact is that these issues exist in the community, and they seem to be perhaps getting worse in some instances. So very supportive, and hopefully this will give some relief to tenants throughout the city. Thank you. And I will take the
Chairs back to you.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion, we will vote. So all in favor or opposed? And I believe there is a couple abstentions. Got everybody? Thank you. That carries unanimously with one abstention. Thank you, committee. Okay, where are we in our agenda here? We passed that. On to 10.2. This is an application for rural Hamilton official plan amendment for zoning bylaw for lands located at 2069 Binbrook Road in Glanbrook, which was deferred from the November 3rd, 2020 meeting. And Councillor Johnson, I believe you have a motion on this item.
Thank you. Yes, if you'd please go to 10.2, amending motion. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for the extra time that was needed. I'm just going to go right down to therefore be it resolved. So it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Pearson, that the following amended planning instruments be approved by the Planning Committee. A revised rule of Hamilton official plan amendment to delete policy 2.0 from the draft amendment presented to the Planning Committee on November the 3rd, 2020, and to add a new policy 2.2 to prohibit the severance of the existing second dwelling on the lot, and to change the inset map attached as Appendix A to this motion, and B, a revised zoning bylaw to establish a minimum lot area and prohibit a residential care facility attached as Appendix B to this motion. If I can speak to it, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to bring everybody back up to speed, this was a severance that went to the LPAT. Staff vehemently opposed it because there were two buildings, there were two houses. One was the old farm help home. So if you look at our policies and the Greenbelt policies, one lot, one house. This was allowing for two houses to be on one lot. The concern was that the two houses would then be severed again, and then there would be now two lots one house on each lot. So just to, we just wanted to clean that up to make it very site specific, that they would not allow any more severances on this property. And the care, and just to let you know that the residential care facility is a blanket policy that's put on all rural properties, especially severed lots. It just prohibits, again, one more building being added onto the property. So anyways, thank you very much, everyone. I hope I get all your support. And then I'd be happy to move 10.2 as amended.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, your seconder was Councillor Pearson, was it? Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the table? Not seeing any, so we'll go to the vote on that. All right, everybody, thank you. That passes unanimously. And then on to item 10. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by, I'd like to second this. Okay, sorry. So 10.2 is moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson, and there were no public submissions received regarding this matter. Is there any discussion from committee on 10.2? Not seeing any. We'll go to the vote. All in favor or thank you. That carries unanimously. Is there another vote here? We're good? Yeah, it was already as amended. Okay, thank you. Sorry, just double checking with clerks that we're in order here. So on to motions. The first is 11.1, the special enforcement area with increased fines at Tiffany and Sherman Falls. And I just got a note from General Manager Thorne that he's stepping out. So questions to the GM will have to go to Brian Hollingworth, who is acting GM. Councillor Ferguson, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a motion that's very similar to the one that was put in place at Webster's Falls and Two's Falls. We're experiencing a lot of illegal parking on Wilson Street coming down the escarpment, and it's particularly dangerous because despite the fact that it's posted as no parking, the fine was so minimal, people weren't complying, I guess is the right word. And so they're parking along Wilson Street on top of the bicycle lane. And so first of all, the cyclists had their lane taken away from them, but more importantly, it's dangerous because cyclists coming down that hill, I'm told, go between 50 and 60 kilometers per hour because they're running downhill, and it's a nice smooth paved road. And the fear is that particularly a child sitting in the back seat will open the car door as the cyclist is going by, and we don't even want to think about the consequences of that. So the motion is before you to put this special enforcement issue in place at Tiffany Falls that has a small parking lot of its own. But outside that parking lot, we're going to increase the fines as a deterrent because of the health and safety issues. So the resolution is before you, and I just need a seconder.
That's Councillor Johnson. Thank you. So is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I support this 100%. We have the same issue at Grindstone Falls in Waterdown, and we did pass a motion, so it is also captured under similar. But it really is, you know, it takes the enforcement. So enforcement has been great. It just amazes me how many people are still parking in the special enforcement area, and there's all kinds of signage up. So you know, I just hope that the enforcement is available to cover off all these areas. As I say, it's been terrific in Grindstone, but with the closure of Two's Falls and the Peak, you know, a lot of people came over to Grindstone. And by the way, just so you know, our waterfalls, particularly Grindstone, Webster's 2, and probably Tiffany, they are being actively promoted on websites in Toronto, in magazines, and it's actually showing pictures of them and directing people how to get to Waterdown, Ancaster, and Dundas. So just so you know, it is being heavily promoted in the Toronto area. I find it extremely frustrating. But thank you. Those are my comments. 100% support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, just one additional piece of information. I'm working with Brian Hollingworth and Gordon McGuire. We approved the capital budget to redo Wilson Street between Rousseau and Filman down to the city limits. And there is a short piece of truck climbing lane that was there for before the 403 was put in place, when heavy trucks would come up there. And I don't want to chase people away from enjoying our natural features. So we're looking at taking that truck climbing lane about 300 meters out of service, moving the highway to the north by one lane, and opening up additional parking on the south side up against the escarpment, so the public isn't walking down the live road. And you know, Brian Hollingworth is here. He can answer any questions if you like, but his intent is to put the parking of the cars and then the bicycle lane inside that to protect the cyclists coming down the hill, to keep them away from the traffic. So that's an additional enhancement we're working on, to give more parking, to allow the public to come and enjoy these facilities. But beyond that, we need this enforcement. I'm sorry I didn't include that in my earlier comments.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's good to add that clarification for accommodating residents that do want to come visit these features. Any further discussion from committee on the motion that's on the floor? Not seeing any, so we'll go to the vote. Thank you. That carries unanimously. To 11.2, which is a demolition permit for 154 Wilson Street East in Ancaster. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This involves a lot that on a home on it and a pool that is generally empty unless you get a heavy rain, which creates a dangerous situation. I was reluctant to bring this in because it was the subject of a very controversial rezoning and involved a 5-floor condominium facility with taking away privacy of neighbors. But the developers now withdrawn that and switched it over to a townhouse development, which will be more readily appreciated by the community. So I'm prepared now to support. I want to get this house down because transients are living in there. I say it's been vacant for years, and the pool is just dangerous, having water in there, and there's virtually no fencing left. So it's before you that we direct the chief building official to issue a demolition permit for 154 Wilson Street in Ancaster in accordance with Bylaw 09206 as amended by Bylaw 13185. And the rest is all the routine stuff we typically do for these direction related to demolition. So it's before you.
Thank you, Councillor. And your seconder?
I don't have one. I see Councillor Judy Partridge is seconding it.
Thank you. So the motion is on the floor. Is there any discussion from committee? Seeing Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking for clarification with respect to the pool as part of the demolition, Councillor. Is it being filled in?
Yeah, well, it'll be the concrete walls will have to be removed. It's a concrete pool, and then yes, it will be filled in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. So all in favor or opposed? Thank you. That carries unanimously. On to flip the page. 11.3, Winona Point application. This is Councillor Pearson.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for that, because I'm going to read it off screen. I only have the one screen. So it's moved by myself, and I'll ask Councillor Brenda Johnson if she'll second this. It's Winona Point application notification, whereas applications for initial official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Winona Point 1290 South Service Road were deemed complete on January 21st, 2021. Whereas a virtual developers information meeting has been tentatively scheduled for Thursday, March 25th, 2021 to engage the community. And whereas this community is bounded by the QEWA and separated by other intervening land uses such as city park, and whereas the ward councillor has been working with the applicant to increase the circulation notice for the virtual developers information meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that to ensure consistent notification, staff be directed to increase the circulation of the notice of statutory public meeting beyond the required 120 meters to include the area of Baseline Road and Riviera Ridge to be consistent with the notice provided for the developers information meeting, and to undertake a supplementary mail out to ensure that the additional properties beyond the 120 meters receive notice of a complete application. If I could just speak to it, Mr. Chairman, it's self-explanatory. So I have asked the developers to increase the circulation area on this particular development because it's on the south side of the highway in the vicinity of Costco, and because landowners to the north are going to be affected, we've increased that circulation area, and our staff have to be given direction in order to be consistent with that when they send out their notice of the complete application and the public meeting going forward. So that's what this is for. It's just housekeeping.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the table now? I'm not seeing any. Nothing. Thank you. So we're going to go to the vote. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Johnson, yep.
I can get to the vote. Thank you. That carries unanimously. Our next motion, Councillor Johnson, I'm going to hand the chair over to you if I can.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to go to the motion here. This is... Sorry, I just got to switch screens.
Time's up.
So I'm moving this as chair on behalf of Councillor Pauls. Can't see you guys. So if there's somebody that would like to second this, just
I'll second it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. So this is a matter before the that was before the Committee of Adjustment, whereas the owner of lands at 109 East 11th applied for minor variances to enable the conversion of an existing single detached dwelling to contain 2 dwelling units, whereas the minor variances were scheduled to be heard on February 18th, 2021 in accordance with the Planning Act, which states, the hearing of every application shall be held in public, and the committee shall hear the applicant and every other person who desires to be heard in favor of or against the application, and the committee may adjourn the hearing or reserve its decision. Whereas there were members of the public who had registered to speak at the hearing on this application and who had also submitted written objections to the application. Whereas due to technical issues at the city, the members of the public who had registered to speak at the hearing were not heard. Whereas the minor variances were approved by the Committee of Adjustment, and whereas an appeal of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT, was received by the city on March 10th, 2021. Therefore, be it resolved that Council directs staff from Legal Services to attend the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal hearing in opposition of the application at 109 East 11th Street, minor variances to enable the conversion of the existing single detached dwelling to contain 2 dwelling units by the Committee of Adjustment, as members of the public who were registered to speak were not heard. And B, that should an outside planner be required at the hearing, that they be funded from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. And C, that the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development be authorized to file a placeholder appeal where the opinion of the General Manager, in consultation with the Ward Councillor and the Chair of the Planning Committee, that the Committee of Adjustment did not act in accordance with Section 45(6) of the Planning Act. So the motion is on the table before you. I'm just going to switch back to my committee screen there.
And I believe that Councillor Pauls has got her hand up. So I recognize Councillor Pauls. Welcome to the Planning Committee. Councillor Pauls, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair. I just want to say that we as council know how important delegations are when it affects their area, and that the city values everybody's voice. As I was sitting here listening to the planning, we heard many voices, and it's important that we hear them. I want to tell you that I got a call from Mr. Matthews on East 11th, and I had calls from people from Inverness saying that I want to set the picture. There's a little street, East 11th. They have 25 homes on that. Out of the 27 homes, I heard through the constituents that there are at least 7 of them already, two-dwelling units. Parking is a big issue, and it's not only parking. There's other issues. And the day of February 18th, when I had lots of conversation, and I went there myself back in January and early February, talking about this problem, I assured them that they would have a voice, that they could put their plans together and come and delegate. And believe it or not, they were really excited about that. Matter of fact, Mr. Charles Matthew took it upon himself, and the stack of notes he had and he showed me was incredible. He did his homework. The day of the 18th, I assured them that it's an easy thing to do. Just click on the button and you'll be on. And they were actually saying, are you sure? And I kept saying, everything will be fine. And I remember that day, February 18th, I couldn't even get on. And once I got on, I heard rumors by the committee there saying, oh, we're having problems. Oh, we cannot hear. Oh, we're going to have problems all day. And these constituents that were on were hearing every single word. The time it came for them to speak, they were there. I knew they were there. They were phoning me. They were texting me. And the Committee of Adjustment just basically said, oh, we can't hear them, so let's move on and let's pass it. And I was shocked because myself, I went on the chat box that we all use and said, please, can I speak? And I wasn't even allowed to speak after. I spoke at the beginning, saying that the constituents were there to speak. And when this was happening, I clearly texted them, please let me speak. And I wanted to tell them if we could postpone. And we all know the technical problem, and this is a new era of doing WebEx meeting. And we all know we have problems, but that shouldn't have happened. And my point is, after that committee was completed, I spent the whole day with these constituent complaining, saying, what kind of committee was that? You promised it would go smoothly. And I had to tell them that we will fight it. So I quickly called Mrs. Sheffield and asked if they reconsider and do another meeting. And they voted no. So therefore, I had it in my hand. I had to figure out what to do. I called General Manager Steve Robichaud, and he kindly suggested that we do that, that they fight it out path. I remember the whole community emailing the mayor, and they got him involved as well. And if anybody wants to go to that day, you'll see what had happened. So this is my motion with the help of Steve Robichaud to have a voice. I'm just saying, whether it would have passed or not, I do not know. But I do know that every citizen of Hamilton needs to have a voice when they're opposing where they live. So I am for it. I applaud all my residents to really do their homework. And I just want to say, I hope you all support this, because I believe that every counselor that's in planning, or every counselor we have, agrees. The residents, we are here for the residents, and we're here to hear how the impact has when something is changed on their street. So thank you and I want to thank Councilor Danko for bringing the motion. I know he had a couple of questions, and I'm sure General Manager Steve Robichaud, if you want to have any other question, you could ask him. And I hope it passes today. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Partridge and then I have myself, so I'll probably have to flip this over to Councillor Farr in a minute. So Councillor Partridge, you're up first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I guess my question, perhaps to Steve Robichaud or perhaps to Madam Clerk or both, but in this new world where we're having the virtual meetings, is there not something in a policy that in that kind of a situation that the application, even for a minor variance, should be tabled to the next meeting or until they can get the electronics figured out? Because that's appalling. That is absolutely appalling, and it's completely against the city policies. The Planning Act. I mean, it's appalling that residents would not be heard. So I'd like to hear from someone in planning, Steve Robichaud perhaps, or Jason Thorne, and just what do we do to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Through you, Madam Chair, Steve Robichaud
Thank
speaking. Where staff are aware that the problem is at our end from a hosting perspective, we will bring it to the chair's attention and ask, in the case for the Committee of Adjustment, we will suggest to the chair that they should defer consideration of this matter until such time as we deal with the, see if we can resolve the technological issue and whether it's specific to one or two individuals or if it's a broader system. I mean, ultimately it'd be no different than if it was a snow day and City Hall was closed. We could always just defer consideration of that public meeting and reschedule it at a future point in time. There are sort of statutory timeframes under which we're supposed to process applications, but I would suggest that from a process or a fairness perspective, if we in the city knew that the problem was at our end and we were having technology issues, then we would flag that for the chair's attention with the suggestion that we either pause the meeting, to adjourn it for an hour to see if we can fix the technology issue. And if we're not able to fix it, then in the worst case scenario, we would have to reschedule the meeting and apologize to the public in that case. I think in this case, we were aware there were some technology issues and we brought it to the chair's attention, the Committee of Adjustment, but they decided to proceed because they know that they have so many matters on the agenda and they were trying to balance the individuals in this case with trying to, 25 to 30 other applicants. So they felt that because they had already received written correspondence that they were comfortable proceeding with the Committee of Adjustment meeting. And that's what's triggered, I think if you look in the resolution, if we encounter this situation again and the committee is unwilling to pause, then the general manager can file an appeal and come to Planning Committee to seek authorization on how to proceed or not. Patrick McDonald for legal may have additional feedback on this matter, but I can just say from a planning process point of view, we agree with what the councillor was suggesting, that we really should give people their day in court, and rather than just proceeding if we know that the problem is at our end of the technology point of view. Thank you.
Steve, I appreciate that. And Madam Chair, thank you. But, do we not need to have a specific policy in place? I don't see the virtual meeting stopping anytime soon. And, it just seems to me that if the answer at this point is to continue to bring these motions forward to planning, it's a little bit backwards. I'd like to hear from Patrick McDonald, actually, if we need to have a specific policy that, and we should work on it. I don't mean to, put it forward today, but if we have a specific policy, then the chair of the Committee of Adjustment or any other committee would need to follow that policy.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge. Everyone, can you please mute yourselves? I'm hearing typing. I'm hearing people chatting. I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I was having a hard time with it as well.
Thank you. So legal, Patrick McDonald, please. If you're on, I don't see you.
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Yes. Yeah. Hi. Thank you. So through the chair, so as Councillor Partridge has picked up, the issue is that despite all the changes to legislation dealing with virtual council meetings, dealing with the response to the pandemic, those sections of the Planning Act with respect to the Committee of Adjustment weren't adjusted. So that requirement for a public hearing is still there, but it doesn't kind of address that issue of what is a public meeting or what meets that minimum standard. So Yes, again, we could potentially take this offline, but provided there's nothing that conflicts with the Planning Act or with the delegated authority to the Committee of Adjustment, that a policy could be explored to do that. But again, it just has to balance, as Mr. Robichaud said, that there is also a requirement statutorily for the application to be heard. And if it doesn't get heard within a certain amount of time, the applicant then has a right of appeal. So there's certainly a tension to be resolved there, and part of that is arising, I believe, from the fact that the provincial legislation didn't change to take this into account.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry, Councillor Partridge, I see that our clerk is willing to come forward about the procedural bylaw. It sounds like we have one already. So go ahead.
Yeah, I did hear that. Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah.
Yes, a new section had been added for virtual meetings during an emergency in the procedural bylaw, which is currently 21-021, section 11. 11.2, upon being apprised that a virtual meeting is interrupted and cannot proceed with its live feed, we would recess for 15 minutes. If the live feed of a virtual meeting can't be resumed within 15 minutes, the meeting is supposed to be considered adjourned, and the meeting can be rescheduled to another day or to the next regularly scheduled meeting date. And if the virtual meeting is interrupted and live feed cannot be resumed, the names of the committee members present and any decisions made to that point shall be recorded in the minutes.
So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
And Elsie Kelsey, thank you. I really appreciate that. So why did that not happen in this case?
Thank you. And I think Mr. Robichaud alluded to it earlier. So go ahead, Steve.
Through you, Madam Chair, staff did advise the Committee of Adjustment of these concerns, but the Chair and the committee elected to proceed with the hearings, notwithstanding what staff had brought to their attention. So I was not at the hearings, and I can't speculate what was in the committee's mind, but this issue was brought to their concern. But based on a review of the information, it appears that the committee members felt that they had already heard from the residents. They understood that the residents were opposed to this minor variance application based on the written correspondence received to date, and they felt that they would proceed based on the information that they had in front of them, notwithstanding the committee, staff's suggestion to the committee that we should pause the hearing at that point in time. And that resulted, and so the residents had no other choice but to appeal the committee's decision, which led to today's motion. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you,
all right.
Councillor
Partridge. Thank you very much. But I'm just, what about, is there not a clerk, a representative of the clerk's office at the Committee of Adjustment? They should have known this.
Through Madam Chairman, no, there is nobody from the city clerks in attendance. Okay. I can tell you we will be, both Jason Thorne and myself and Anita Faybeck have had discussions, and we will be attending a future Committee of Adjustment meeting to discuss this matter with them and highlight some council's and staff's concerns about how we proceed. If there's if these technical issues pop up again, what would be the expected course of action to take on a go-forward basis? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so what I'm hearing is there's going to be a bit of a teaching moment out of this situation with the committee members. And but I think if the policy exists, then it needs to be made pretty clear that they can't rule against it. It is a policy that we've put in place. I appreciate the explanation, but I'm just appalled that the residents were not allowed to speak to this item, and that it was passed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as promised, I put my name on the list. So Councillor Farr, if you don't mind being the second vice chair, I can pass this over to you.
Okay, so proceed.
Thank you. So just to let everyone know that since we started to have these cyber meetings, we have 3 rural members who do not have very good broadband in their farms. So they had to we arranged for them to come into the Glenbrook Municipal Center so that they would have the Wi-Fi set up there. They could bring their tablets in. So as a result, it's either myself or my staff that go to Glenbrook every 2 weeks to be their IT support. So if it freezes, they have sound issues, it's pretty bad when we become the IT support, but it worked out very, very well. So it brings me to my point that I was there listening to those proceedings, and quite frankly, Councillor Pauls, please apologize to your residents on our behalf. It was not done well. It really did dismiss them, and I felt embarrassed by it. So my question to you, Mr. Robichaud, through our second vice chair,
because the policy was ignored, does this not deem the meeting out of order? Can we not just go back to having that meeting done over again rather than going all the way into LPAT and through all this expense? Can we not just redo?
Director Robichaud.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Legal staff were asked that question, and based on the provisions of the Planning Act, there does not appear to be any recourse from that perspective, because this is sort of a municipal act bylaw that lays out the procedures. This would be because it was under the Planning Act, and the Committee of Adjustment also because they're under the Statutory Procedures Act or something to that effect. They have a little bit of a different set of rules and regulations. It was the opinion of legal staff that there was no recourse sort of to hit the redo on this Committee of Adjustment matter. Unfortunately.
Thank you for that answer. It just seems to me as a layman and being involved in a couple of OMB myself, that the Planning Act is very clear about the public participation, and there wasn't any. In fact, it was decapitated. And that's what makes me wonder if it's against the Planning Act, because the Committee of Adjustment is a public meeting. It is welcoming the public's input. And yet we literally just cut them off at the knees, and it wasn't allowed. So that part of the Planning Act did not follow through. Those are just my comments. I'm not a lawyer. It's just as a layman person, and I can appreciate the frustration. So thank you very much, Councillor Farr. I'll take the chair back.
Okay.
If there's no other speakers, it has been duly noted and seconded. Councillor Pauls, one more comment before we vote.
Yes, I just wanted to say that the thing that really upset me was that after I put it on my chat that I needed to talk to make sure that my constituents are heard, and if we could put it later on, they basically did not allow me to speak. They basically said, no, you're not allowed to speak by not responding to it. Mm-hmm. And that was sad, and that's what my constituents were upset as well, that I did not have a chance to defend them. Yeah. And I really felt slighted. I called them right away, and you know what they said? Oh, we've had problems all day. Well, then if you've had problems all day, you better stop. And they were saying that, oh, we've had problems, it wasn't only yours. Well, that didn't do it right. And then I asked them, could you redo it? And they literally said they voted against it. And that was why I was upset. And I am for my constituents. I will listen to them, and I'm proud of them. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I think now they know you're standing up for them still. So it's been duly noted, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, the vote will be going up. I'm assuming not in the same room. So just to let you know, Elsie Kelsey, I have a really weird format coming up on my screen, which takes me a little bit longer. Okay, so I'm going to turn the chair back over to Councillor Danko, because I'm assuming that you're going to find out what the outcome is.
Thank you. Yes, that carries unanimously. Thank you. On notices of motion, we have 12.1, which is 105 Filman Road. Councillor Ferguson, do you wish to waive the rules?
Yes, I do. It is a time-sensitive matter, and I'll explain it when we get into the motion. And I'd like Councillor Pearson, if she's prepared to second it, because it is a heritage issue.
Okay, so motion to waive the rules moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Vote on that first. Thank you. That carries. And Councillor Ferguson, you can present your motion.
Yeah, this is an address that was part of the long list that was approved by committee about a month and a half ago, related to pre-Confederation buildings. And so whereas 105 Filman Road is listed on the city's municipal heritage registry as a property of cultural heritage value or interest, and of course that was done at the previous meeting. And whereas 105 Filman Road, Ancaster is currently identified as a low priority on the council-approved designated work plan, and whereas the owners expressed an interest in the redevelopment of this property, the motion is that 105 Filman Road, Ancaster be identified as a high priority in the council-approved designated work plan. So the developer's been in, met with staff, they've contacted me, they want to move forward with demolishing this house and putting in a series of townhouses. For anyone who's ever come up the 403 or come west on Mohawk Road, as soon as you cross the 403 on the north side or on the right-hand side as you're coming in, there's that large white house that sits up on a hill. So it's really a gateway area, very similar to what Brandon House was, probably more pronounced because it's a gateway into the town. And in addition to that, it has been the home of a number of Stelco executives, presidents, and other community leaders who have lived there over the years. And I've been told by the house that it has a lot of heritage features. So we just need to have staff go and do their formal review, put it on a high priority because it is at risk of being demolished. So the motion is before you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to remember that this was already heritage designated because I can remember the folks living there. This is the big White House, right, Lloyd? That's just overlooking the 403?
Yes, it is. You recall during we had the big upgrade to bringing a number of homes into the registry. It got registered, but it never got on the designated list and get done before it's demolished.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. That makes sense then, because I remember being on the Heritage Committee and the owners at the time coming forward and did not want it designated because it was costing them too much in house insurance. But I thought we went ahead with that. I'm fully supportive. Thank you very much. Appreciate the answer.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion before you? Sorry, who was the seconder, Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Pearson?
Councillor Pearson, as our member on the Heritage Committee.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Not seeing any from committee. So all in favor or opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, committee. To the general information, the general manager's update. The general manager has stepped out, so I don't know if anybody else from staff has an update, but if not, we'll move on.
Through you, Chair, as Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking, as Acting General Manager, I do not have any updates.
Thank you, Brian. So on to the closed session minutes from February 16th. I need a mover and seconder to approve the closed session minutes as presented and that they remain confidential. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Partridge. One more technical glitch from the computer before we're done. Okay, there we go. Carried unanimously. Thank you. And finally, adjournment. Mover and a seconder to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Don't forget to vote, please, before you log off. Said log off, right?
Log off.
All right, you can all log off now.
Good, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.